Hello kittens, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Cat Talks, and today I will be talking about the 14 books I read in June, so keep watching to discover your next favourite. Don't forget to smash that like button as hard as Christian Grey, and give a little tickle to the subscribe button to see more of me. So the first book that I finished in June was The Changing of the Guards by Matt Spencer. I have a full, unfortunately unfavourable review of this fantasy epic, which you can check out if you click the button above. This one is a fantasy about a young man who discovers that maybe the society that he works for isn't as good as he thought it was. And this one is a book I picked up from NetGalley, so it was an advanced reader copy. The second book that I picked up this month was My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness. This is an adaptation of a webcomic, I believe, that someone has written about their journey exploring loneliness, depression, eating disorder, anxiety attacks, everything that would stop you from living your life to the fullest. And I thought this one was super hard-hitting. It definitely wasn't what I expected from the cover. It was super hard-hitting and a super honest look at life as someone who is like trying to impress others and maybe doesn't know what they themselves want. Then the third book I picked up was Proper English by KJ Charles. This is a historical romance between two women set during a hunting party. The main character is the women's national champion for target shooting, and her brother's friend and his fiancée are kind of like at this house, and everyone, you know, lots of ladies and gentlemen have come to shoot some birds. Unfortunately, a storm breaks out and they end up stranded in the house just after they discover that one of the guests has been murdered. This was so well written. I absolutely love this, and KJ Charles is now one of my favourite indie authors. This book was fantastic in terms of plot and in terms of pacing. The murder doesn't happen until more than halfway through, which means you get an intimate feel of the characters and their relationships between them. So I really enjoyed this, and I definitely recommend picking it up. I believe KJ Charles primarily writes male-on-male, Victorian and fantasy romance set in the historical themes, so I'm definitely excited to check out more of his or her work. The fourth book I read this month was The City and the City by China Miéville. This book was incredible. This book was a full 5 stars from me. It was absolutely amazing. China has such a command of language and of prose. I couldn't stop reading. It took me much longer actually than it normally would because I was so engrossed in the world. I feel like I didn't want it to end. I stopped reading and still thought I was in The City and the City. That's how good this book is. That's how much it makes you think about reality and about what's your reality versus someone else's, and it's just a masterpiece of literary fiction, honestly. It's a kind of fantasy, I guess, but it's honestly, I would recommend this to non-fantasy lovers as well. This is so good, so good, so good, so good. Very confusing, but very good. If you've ever been sucked into a book as hard as I was with The City and the City and kind of forgotten that you live in the real world, then just comment Portal down below and I will know who is in my tribe. The fifth book I picked up this month was The Girl He Used to Know by Tracy Garvis Greaves. This is an adult romance between two people who knew each other in university and dated, but then had to split up for reasons that we don't know and meet again as adults. It continues over 2 timelines. This was a very quiet book for me. It didn't really have much going for it until the last 25 to 40 pages, which were an absolute heart-wrenching, like awful experience, honestly. I was so nervous for the characters at the end. It was very well written, it was very beautifully told, but it just kind of like, it didn't really have anything happening until, like I said, at the end. So I gave this book a 3.5 stars. The next book I read was The Girls by Emma Cline. This one I buddy read with what everybody else is reading. I had an absolutely fantastic time buddy reading this with her. We came to the novel with a very different backgrounds, and we therefore found different things in it to talk about, and I really enjoyed that experience. It's been my first ever buddy read. But I didn't really enjoy the novel. I felt like it wandered a lot. It didn't really have much. It had a few pacing concerns. I felt like the ending was very disappointing, and I gave this book a 3 stars. I also felt like the main character didn't really learn anything or develop or become a person throughout the book. I mean, when she's 14, she's kind of nasty, but at least she has a personality, but the adult version of her doesn't seem to. However, this book is about a young girl who is drawn into a cult, who are later accused of murdering someone, and about what she knows about what happened that night. The premise is really exciting and interesting, and I can absolutely see why you would want to pick this up, so please, if you like that kind of thing, don't let my review deter you, experience it for yourself. Then it was Who's That Girl by Vari McFarlane. This one was an absolute gem of a contemporary. I think I gave it 4 stars. It is about a woman around 30 who has been engaged in an office friendship with an engaged man. She goes to their wedding because she knows both the bride and the groom, and he ends up kissing her at that wedding. Unfortunately for them, the bride sees them, and her reputation is in tatters. She can't go back to London to her job. She has to go elsewhere and find other things to do, and ends up ghostwriting the biography of an up-and-coming actor. This book is about self-discovery. It's about learning who you are, tackling some really deep slitted themes, including online bullying, isolation, surviving a parent's suicide. This book is just had me on the edge of my seat. It was so packed full of various things and various difficulties, and I really recommend this one if you enjoy a good contemporary. The 7.5 book that I read this month was an audiobook, and it was Kevin Hart's, I can't make this up? I don't know. Anyway, it was Kevin Hart's Life Lessons. I really enjoyed this audiobook. It was a reread for me, and I didn't really intend on reading it, which is why it is a 0.5. It definitely was not on the TBR, but I couldn't resist. I got stuck in a queue somewhere, and I had my headphones on me, and Kevin Hart just came to mind. So this is a autobiography about Kevin Hart's life to date. It is also a kind of like, as it says on the cover, life lessons. It talks about his grit and his determination to become a star, and I just found this fantastically funny. 5 stars every time that I listen to it. There is some child abuse, but Kevin doesn't see it as child abuse. It happened to him, so yeah. But other than that, I really enjoyed it. I thought that it's a great read and a great insight into Kevin's personality. I'm not a fan of Kevin Hart's comedy, but then I haven't seen that much of it. This book was my introduction to Kevin, and I just absolutely loved it. The 8th book I read is The Rebel of Rayleigh High. Again, this is a contemporary. It is an incredibly touching and dramatic story. There are content warnings here for gang rape and online bullying and physical bullying. There is also some serious issues around child abuse, but the author handles it really well. I absolutely loved this read. I thought it was heartbreaking and fantastically done as the characters grow. It was a little bit like A Man Comes and Saves You, but it was also very much the main character driving it, so I'm a little torn on whether or not it was the man saving her, because it was really just the man, the new guy at school, kind of like taking an interest in her that forces her to reevaluate who she is and gives her the boost of confidence she needed to gain back who she was. A fantastic story, and 10 out of 10 recommend. I think I gave it a 4 stars. So not 10 out of 10 recommend, but I do recommend it. Okay, I gave it a 4 stars, so I guess a 4 out of 5 recommend. The next book I read was On Writing by Stephen King. This is a gem. This is another autobiography, so I guess I am really into reading autobiographies this month. I definitely was not intentional. It was just that I had been on the list for this at the library for a really long time, and it finally came in. I took some notes today from this, and I really enjoyed it. It had some writing advice, it had some life advice. It also just had general anecdotes from his life, and I really appreciated and enjoyed them. He is a really good writer. His voice sparkles from the page, and it's great to get some of his advice and inspiration. The 10th book I read was Surprise Me by Sophie Kinsella. This is a really light and fluffy contemporary. Nothing much happens in this one. It is about a young married couple who find out that they might have to be married for another 70 years because they are so healthy and young, and they kind of have a crisis of confidence, and it's about how they are trying to manage their relationship and bring back the spice. I did mention in my reading vlog that I'm confused as to why Surprise Me is the title, because that isn't actually much of the book. This was an interesting study on what happens if you put your parents on too high of a pedestal, and I kind of enjoyed it. It was interesting. I thought it was light and fluffy, and it brought absolutely nothing new, but Sophie Kinsella's voice is a very easy one to read, and I read this in a morning, so 3 stars. 3 stars. The next book I read was Behind Blue Eyes. This is another pickup from NetGalley, so this is an ARC. The bingo machine was so kind to me this month, and let me pick a lot of NetGalley and indie books, which was really great because that was exactly why I added those categories. Behind Blue Eyes is the story of a woman who moves from the UK to Sweden to live with her new boyfriend and discovers the corpse of his ex-girlfriend during a party. Now, she is an investigative reporter, and she gets it into her head that she needs to figure out who did this, because she needs to know if it was her boyfriend or not. There are a lot of twists and turns in your mind as you're reading it and trying to work out what is happening. I definitely didn't guess what was happening, although I did guess the murderer a little early, and I thought the ending was a little surreal, but I really enjoyed this book, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. That is it for now. I'm going to be anning myself later for the last 2 books for this month because I haven't read them yet because I had to record this a little early, mostly due to the fact that I have to get these back to the library today, which meant I had to film a little early. I'm sorry about that. Take it away, future cat. And then I read Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. This is kind of a literary science fiction, if that's a thing. It is very short, it's only about 200 pages long, and it is super heartfelt and kind of like an exploration on intelligence and kindness and compassion, and I just loved this. So this is about a young man who has developmental problems, and he's chosen by two scientists to be the first ever human trial of an operation that makes you intelligent. Now he gets, it succeeds. They first tried it on this mouse called Algernon. It succeeds on our beautiful hero Charlie, and he, becomes very intelligent indeed, but he finds some flaws in the experiment that they conducted on him, and this book is about his journey discovering those flaws and what happens afterwards. It is so sad and it is so good, and I highly recommend this even to non-science fiction readers. I gave this one 5 stars. The penultimate book I read this month was The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. This is a YA contemporary about a young black girl who sees her childhood best friend murdered in front of her by a policeman during a routine pullover. It is so hard going and heavy hitting. It's about her grief and her actions afterwards to try and come to terms with the death and, get some justice for the murdered boy Khalil. This is a really powerful book. I 100% recommend it. It's so strongly written and well written. It does get a bit slow in paces, but I think that is necessary for you to see the ordinary life, because obviously it starts with such a bang. This was really good. It's Booktube's favourite book, and pick it up. I gave this one 5 stars. The last book I read this month was No Ivy League by someone on screen. I received this one as an ARC from NetGalley. It is a comic book, or graphic novel, sorry. It is a graphic novel about a young girl who gets a summer job working in a forest to remove the ivy, and then finds out that, her homeschooled life isn't maybe as open for everyone as she thought it was. It's supposed to be a kind of like YA exploration of racism. Unfortunately, it didn't really do anything for me. The main character doesn't really learn that much during the course of the graphic novel, and it just kind of like left me feeling a bit bland, so I gave this one 3 stars. So if you have read any of the books I covered during this wrap-up, then please comment down below and let me know what you thought of them. If you agree with me, if you disagree, smash that like button or that dislike button if you want to kind of like make your opinions heard, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Catherine Talks. Next week I'll be uploading the currently writing tag, so you will find out all about the current books that I am writing. If you're interested in that, don't forget to check in at 8 PM on Friday CET. I hope you have an amazing book to read and a cup of tea, and you're having a great summer. Miss you terribly.